Okay. We're all okay. Looks like we're ready. Okay. We are now recording. We'd like to welcome everybody out to the Wednesday, April 19th, Harriman City Planning Commission, our regular Planning Commission meeting. Appreciate everybody being here. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our own Wendy for this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a full quorum today, as well as all of our alternates, so we appreciate all of the Planning Commission being here tonight. Item 3.3, are there any conflicts of interest with anyone on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and move to item 3.4, which is approval of the minutes for our February 15th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.4.
Okay, we have a motion by Heather.
Second.
Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. We will go ahead and, before I jump into this, I do want to first read our public comment policy and procedure, since we do have some items on our agenda tonight for public hearing. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the Deputy City Recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. And this policy also applies to all public hearings, which we have tonight as well. So with that being said, I just want to bring it to the attention of those that are in attendance. We have received quite a few comments on items, 5.2 and 5.3 on the agenda. They have been distributed prior to every one of us on the Planning Commission. We have read those comments and we appreciate those. So those will also be entered into our meeting minutes as a part of the public hearing process for the public record as well. So just want to make everybody aware of that also. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to item 4.1. I believe Sheldon has these first couple of items, so let's go ahead with item 4.1.
All right, good evening. So this was a subdivision we saw back in November of 2022. Second here. At the time when this was brought before the commission did have concerns regarding access, particularly to the southern property, just to ensure that this property would not become landlocked. Again, this property here is located on the west end here of the city, zone FR1, just over 5 acres. What the initial proposal is, and I guess the same proposal, is just a one-lot subdivision. As I mentioned, some of the concerns that the commission did have was regarding the access of this property, well, access to the southern property. Again, before I get into there, I guess I'll just mention that, as proposed, it does meet lot width density, but it meets zoning, and as far as engineering has reviewed, it does meet their standards as well. Again, one of the concerns the commission did have was regarding the access to the southern lot, and they just wanted to ensure that, if a road was constructed, could be constructed across that easement. What the applicant has submitted, they have submitted 2 conceptual roads showing that, both these roads, well, both the proposals for these, one across the easement and one across a potential a road if they do decide to future subdivide, sorry, if they decide to in the future subdivide the property, sorry. Again, just kind of a recap, the applicant has, secured some easements to provide water and services and et cetera per ordinance for this property. So he has put in quite a bit of work and resources, to develop this property. And this is one of the conceptual roads. This is the one showing this over the access easement. Engineering has reviewed that it does meet the 10% or less grade requirement, but it does require some substantial retaining walls and et cetera, to make this actually work. Again, there's the second option for access through a public road would be over the existing driveway that they're proposing to service the house that will be on this property. Again, this could be constructed to meet city standards. With the construction of this road, the easement would have to be, I guess, removed from the property because this access would cross that easement. Staff does recommend approval on this. If you guys have any questions for me, be happy to answer them.
Yeah, any questions for Sheldon on this?
I believe the applicant is here.
Okay.
In the back, if you have
Great.
any questions for Jose.
So this would allow them to pick either one as an option for the access road?
I'm sorry?
So they could pick either one?
Yeah, but,
Okay.
So this is more just to ensure that there's access can be provided to that rear lot. So when he does his initial development, there will not be any roads constructed. But if at a time, when it is necessary, if he has to provide access to that, to that rear lot, it is plausible.
When there is an easement already established to that other lot, so when that time comes.
Right, there is an easement, yeah.
It would be allowed to happen at that time.
Which, as it
Okay.
currently sits, is not accessible by vehicle or probably
Right.
pedestrians, to be honest with you. But
Maybe a horse.
Salt Lake County owns the easement?
no, it's actually owned by the Fishers, the southern property owners. So there's an access
We're
easement.
talking about the S Road, right?
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
an access easement across that as well as a sewer easement as well.
So the Fishers are the property owners to the south of this one.
Right. but
So they own the easement.
Overlaps the.
The
cove
Ramirez property.
And the joiner to the east.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah.
And the Cove property, yes.
So a private individual owns the easement that overlaps the subdivision lots?
Is that correct?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the issue that we had concerned with before was just, can they actually ensure that I guess it's the Fisher property has access?
Can get
That was all
there.
the question that I had.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Anything else for Sheldon? Okay. We'll allow the applicant to come forward if there's anything additional you want to present to the Planning Commission. If not, that's fine as well. Nothing more? Okay. This is open for a public hearing, so at this time, we will open up item 4.1. Again, just comments on item 4.1 at this time for public comment. If there's anybody here that'd like to present, please come forward and state your name. Yeah, come on forward and we'll get going. Thank you.
Brent Wilson, Majestic Oaks, 14440, down the way. We couldn't hear what was going on. Our concern is if they're gonna use the road going down, or are they gonna come from the Cove? And
Yeah, go ahead and state your comments. We'll just take comments now and then we can address is that the only question you have at this time then? Or is there any
that's
additional
just-
comments you have?
We couldn't tell.
Okay.
We couldn't hear what
Okay.
was being said, and our concern is whether they're gonna use our road or come
Yeah.
in from the east, and
The intent would be to come from on the Salt Lake County Road, coming in.
they're gonna
from
use the Salt Lake County
Yes,
Road.
that's correct.
So
That's the intent.
For
with
just
the-
that
with
one
the
lot.
added- we-
For that one lot, correct, for those lots there. If you want to go back to that. Yeah, to access Majestic Oak Lane, yeah.
Our road can't take it. Have you been up our road? It is one chuck hole after another, additional traffic and then running all the way. And he wants to do multi-level later. And so that coming up our road it just ain't gonna cut it. Until the county comes and decides what they're gonna do to our road to make it work, it's a problem. And that's the big, right now, during this winter, we've had at least 6 weeks with no garbage pickup. And is he gonna help maintain the road? Because you know, nobody plows it or anything right now. Is Harriman, seeing as how he's part of Harriman, are you gonna make his access, you know what I mean? Where, yeah, it's just a big, and I live on, and people are coming down, I live at the very bottom where the creek comes through, and people are coming down there 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, and can't stop on the ice. I can't even, getting out of my driveway is a problem. And you've thrown us in the ditch every time. Every time we're thrown in the ditch. We were promised when the cove started that that would be a dead end, we'd have a gate. If you look back in the minutes, we were promised that would be a dead end and a gate, and they would be accessed from the cove. And we'd really ask you to please, at least for during the construction in the big trucks and cement trucks and everything else up and down that, if he keeps it out of the winter, it's fine, but it's still.
Thank you, sir.
It's not a road that's, and especially if he's looking to change to multi-level, and I don't see how that's, how you're, that has to be a no from the start. Multi, it's got to kind of stay either with the density of the cove or our, if he's going to use our road, he needs to stick with our density, and we're held under forestry
So,
regulations.
sir, your time is up, but go ahead and wrap up your thought and we'll finish.
We can't disturb only so much ground because of the well water and everything else.
Right.
So
Okay,
please consider these things.
thank you. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? If you want to bring up any comment, please come forward. Please come forward. You're allowed to also 3 minutes to make any comments as well. Go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
I'll fill out a form later if you want.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we would want that as well, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Sue Scallion, and we've been up here before about accessing his property with Majestic Oaks Lane. Can you tell us how that got authorized? Because we just talked to the county and they said no, they would not authorize anybody that other than who lived on that road to use it. And like he said, we have not been getting garbage pickup because the road is in such bad shape. They've considered it damaging to the road and to their equipment. They're not plowing it because it's dangerous for their equipment and their drivers. So I know that they've talked about paving the road, but they said they wouldn't pave it until all the utilities were brought up. So is he going to pay for that? Those are our questions we have, and also, you know, how do we get more information on what's going to happen and the timeline? That's kind of what we're interested in. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Are there any other comments on this particular item? We'll give you an opportunity to speak at the end as the applicant. Yeah, so you can come forward when we close the public hearing, and we'll allow you to address those questions. So, okay, with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion by Heather. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Yeah, we'll go ahead and allow the applicant to come forward, provide any additional information or answers to some of these questions as well.
Hi, Jose Ramirez, applicant. In summary, I was approved access through Salt Lake County Road And I have a record of an email from the engineers over at Salt Lake County. And as far as the road goes, that is owned by Salt Lake County as well, so it's a public right-of-way. And that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant on that as well? Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess,
Oh, sorry, one, is it for him or for staff or whatever?
I don't
Go
know.
ahead.
It might be.
Make your comment. We
I'm
can-
just curious, like, as far as improvement goes, did they tell you, like, they're gonna pave it, leave it as is, improvements?
From what I understand, I think there was a interest to pave the road, but I think there was some pushback on that from the residents. This was before I bought the lot up there. They did mention that if I was to subdivide, it would go through a whole different process, but all the comments that they replied to me was as long as it met the fire authority requirements, I was fine to build one house up there.
And that is the intent for the property.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay,
you.
thank you. Any other discussion? Thoughts?
I have a
Yeah,
question for Sheldon.
Maybe for Sheldon, yeah.
They mentioned future improvements. I know sometimes the county may assess it to just a specific area. Would the county be able to assess that to a resident of Harriman if he's in Harriman and uses that road? Will that assessment be on him as well? Does my question make sense?
Are you asking if the county could impose?
Right. So if the county decides to improve the road in the future, can that be imposed on a Harriman resident since he's
That's
accessing it in
Maybe
Harriman?
Matt, you could answer that question. My understanding is we couldn't impose any conditions that made him do any improvements on that county road because it's not within Harriman City.
Right.
Part of one of the conditions of approval is that, he has to comply with any standards set by the county for using that access to his property. And that's something we'll take in consideration, going through the building permitting process and through the plating process as well, just to ensure that, if the county does impose some improvements on that section, that they will be done before, the plat.
So that
is
would be
recorded.
done in review of the subdivision application,
Right, yeah, sorry.
but nobody in the city staff has reached out to the county yet, correct?
Not this time. From what Jose's just provided, stating that he has permission. That's one of the conditions, that he has to provide documentation that the county has granted access to utilize that dead-end road to access this property.
Okay.
So
That's one of the staff recommendations?
Yes,
is-
yes.
The number one staff recommendation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
the cove up in this area is, 15 years old, the oldest. It was alluded to that there was some sort of a commitment or agreement between Harriman and Salt Lake County to gate that road.
And that, I'm not aware
I'm
of that.
unaware of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and there's nothing, on the plat or, with any of the subdivision approvals,
You got a
stating
history
that
there.
I got a history
road
if
to
you
be
want.
gated off. or a
Adam
dead-end
has some
road.
history, might be able to provide some insight.
So, the issue was originally that this land was part of the cove, these two lots, these two 5-acre lots. The cove sold off these lands because they couldn't get access through their development. And so now they're just developing, and because they're basically illegal lots, they have to do a subdivision for those two pieces. At the time, it was due to grade, they could not get up Majestic Oaks for the entire subdivision. There is no intention to do more than these two lots because it's a dead end for those two lots. So to me, it kind of meets the intention. Again, there's not a connection from the cove coming through here. I just want to make sure the residents understand. It's for these two 5-acre pieces that basically originally were going to be with the cove and now they're not. So that just so you guys are aware. And we can't do back and forth questions, unfortunately, so you guys understand that. But the original plan was that the cove was one large development, and when the discussion was tying to Majestic, it was related to draining the entire cove subdivision. That I recall a long time ago.
And I'd just like to state too, just the fact that the current zoning for this property is FR1, so it's 1-acre lot minimums. So, with the current zoning, there's a potential to do a multifamily development there. So you'll see no more than 5 units on that particular lot unless he applies for a rezone and a general plan amendment.
Good to know, as well as the lot To the south, there,
To the
it's
south,
it's a
same
5 acre lot
applies
as well.
on that lot.
So there could be 10 lots.
Maximum.
Potentially,
Maximum.
I think the topography,
Topography
the
would
area is
allow
probably
that.
going to limit a lot of what
Numbers
can be
line
built
up,
out
yeah.
there.
But right now, our only application is for this one subdivision.
That's
for
correct.
one
Single-family.
Single-family home
Yeah,
on that 5
On that
acres.
5 acres.
that's correct.
With the potential of an access to the second 5 acre piece.
Yes.
And that's something that we would have to evaluate at that time.
If it came back
If
to
they
us.
came back, yeah.
Right. At the time, yeah, if he did subdivide it, he had to come back, do a subdivision plat amendment. And at that point, I think we look at more of that connection from Majestic Oaks, because it is a primitive type road. So
And that's why I'm saying the 5 acre piece, because that's what we're reviewing right now.
Correct.
Can't make assumptions of what it may be in the
Who
future.
knows, maybe he
right?
wants to
If,
not have.
if it comes back, then we'll evaluate that time, but at this time, it is just this one 5 acre parcel.
It's basically to make this parcel legally able to
be developed.
to put a building
They
on.
put a home on, right?
So protection for the lot to the south, Mr. Ramirez's driveway, is it going to be stubbed to the lot? We can't landlock that parcel to the south, so
But it has an easement to it.
on the S-curve road,
Correct.
that is not going to be built.
That new applicant could build that road. The intention was to ensure that that road could still be provided to their property.
I think grade-wise, they resolved that it's certainly a possibility.
Correct.
It's possible,
Expensive, but possible.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well.
But that's up to the owner of the parcel to the south for that. It's not Ramirez's responsibility, correct?
Yeah, the only thing I'm wondering about is maybe rather than just say provide documentation from the county allowing, I think we may need to say ensure that the county and the city understand how Majestic Oak Lane will be developed. Something to the effect that, I more want staff to ensure that that road, we can connect. We don't have typically where we have two lots that just go to a road, right? Usually, we're kind of passing the county through our property. This is a little bit different where we're using
The county road to
the county
access.
road. So that's just something,
Sheldon, could you
I don't know how to put that in a motion, but that's
go
my
back to
concern.
that drawing that shows both the driveway and the S-curve?
There you go.
There you go.
So one of the concerns that I did have originally is could that developer of the southern lot, the Kurt Fisher property, could they provide themselves a driveway to the 5 acre piece and still maintain this developer's driveway? Again, we're not talking about subdivision because they'd have to rezone, so we're just talking 2 5 acre lots. So 2 homes. And I believe they showed a full roadway, not just a driveway, which is better.
Right.
But my question, and I couldn't see this because we hopped back and forth, and Sheldon, you talked to him, so I'm okay, just trying to understand it. Can you build both driveways to both properties within the easements? That's all I wanted to understand.
So,
Because if you go back to the drawing that shows the grades,
That one.
so if I am developer B, which is the south property, the Fisher property, again, just making it so I can develop on my one lot, that's all I'm talking about for that 5 acres. Their grading lines in this plan show that they go outside of the easement, so they would have to go to Mr. Ramirez to get authorization to touch that said property. So my question is the city going to require a little additional easement for the road, for this driveway because of that grading potential?
so the additional, it's about 3 feet that go out past the easement. That's
Yeah.
to meet the 53-foot minimum requirement for a public road.
So that's where, so you think a driveway should be sufficient?
Yeah, so if they'd split that in half, on that one side, they'd have, 25 feet to access.
Because that was the only confusion I had, is we were talking about a full-size road, not a driveway.
Driveway access.
And in my mind, this is 2 5 acre pieces, 2 different driveways. So, and to me, I think we're meeting that intent. So, but I don't know how to quantify the concern related to the county in a motion. That's what I'm struggling with right now. Because an email is a lot different than official notification from the county. And so that's where I would like to make sure we have official city correspondence with the county.
Right, that's why I was asking for, condition number 1 is that they actually provides documentation, well, I guess you say official documentation, I guess.
Okay, official documentation? Okay, then I think I know what I can say then.
Any other thoughts, discussions, questions? Do we want to go to the list of recommendations? Are we
Yes,
ready to make a
please.
motion?
Yes, please.
There you go.
I guess one of my, just from the comments that we heard, you know, how the county maintains their road is kind of out of our hands, right?
Yeah.
So that's,
It's a county road. Harriman City doesn't have any say on what the county road, how they maintain it and things like that, unfortunately, with potholes or garbage collections, things like that. That's out of the city's hands
Yeah.
for that situation. That's correct. So,
Okay, I'd like to make a motion with staff's 5 recommendations with an alteration of number 1 to say, provide documentation from the county, provide official documentation from the county allowing access and use plans for Majestic Oak Lane.
is your motion to recommend approval? Sorry,
It is to approve it.
to approve it. Okay, sorry, to approve it. We have a motion by Adam
I'll second.
and a second by Heather. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on this item. Brody,
yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item 4.2. Sheldon, I believe this one's yours as well.
Again, this was a site plan you saw previously. This is for the Serendipity Daycare right here in HTC, just across the street. Zoning's MU2. So back in, you saw the site plan that came to the commission back in July of 2022. The original proposal was for a 7,900 square foot building, 24 parking stalls, and then the potential to add some additional commercial to the site. Since then, the applicant has requested that, to actually expand the use, to increase the size of the building to accommodate more students and et cetera for the preschool. So what they're proposing now is adding an addition to the east of the building, that's attached to the building. It's approximately 2,500 square feet of classroom space, teaching space for the preschool, and an additional 2,500 square feet of storage. Again, to support this expansion, they're providing 27 parking stalls to meet that parking requirement. As far as design standards go, they're maintaining the same design standards from the initial building, which do require approval from HTC, which they did receive. Again, it's just an expansion of the existing building with the same finishes and et cetera. Again, certain standards we look at before, base our findings off of. Engineering didn't have any concerns. Zoning, it did meet the conditional use standards, and it did meet the requirements for the Harriman Town Center design standards. Going back to the parking, that's one of the requirements. With this proposal, they're increasing the overall footprint. So initially, they were providing 24 parking stalls. They had to bump that up to increase the parking. Well, with the increase of the use of the building size, they had to increase the parking. And to do that, they reconfigured the parking. Sorry, I'm getting lost here. Again, just to show here, now when we did the parking calculation, we based this off the classroom space, the space that will be inhabited by the children and used for that particular service. The applicant saying the lower section of this building that you can see here, there's a basement. It's going to be used strictly for storage. Therefore, staff has put a condition in there that that space cannot, if it is converted to a use, that they have to provide parking. So it's just to ensure that they're not going to expand the use without providing additional parking. Again, the site circulation from the original proposal still remains for pickup, drop-off of the students. And one of the concerns staff did have is that they were proposing a gate access to the cul-de-sac behind them. We just want to ensure that they provide pedestrian access, safe pedestrian access through there. The applicant has since submitted new site plans showing something similar to what you see here, just providing a crossing section, eliminating one parking stall, which doesn't impact the parking requirement. They're only required to have 25. So, you know, they could potentially meet that standard, and what they've submitted does meet that standard to provide that pedestrian access. Another thing was landscaping. There was just some minor corrections as far as some additional shrubs and some additional coverage on the site. With that being said, you know, staff does recommend approval for the amendment to that site plan with the following conditions. You guys have any questions for me?
Any questions? Go ahead.
On the original approval, before they added this addition, what was adjacent to the building where the addition's going right now?
So,
Wasn't that the play area?
no, it was actually just proposed as a commercial pad.
Oh,
They
okay.
went up, they just landscaped it. That's what they were originally proposing, and then when a second business came in, then they removed that landscaping and installed that business.
Okay.
But-
Yeah, I
It didn't
kinda
take long for them to come back, because I
Yeah.
remember they would plan for this to be
Yeah.
an addition to it, but yeah, it didn't take long for the need to be there, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops, yeah,
And
just
then-
that section there.
And then the elevations that they're showing, none of those are showing the new addition?
Yeah, the second from the top showing,
Yeah,
what is that?
No, the second one from the top's not showing it.
so it's,
Is that like?
Courtyard north.
I may have attached the wrong elevations.
Okay.
So the full plan set's in the actual
Is in the
staff report.
packet, yeah.
but, yeah.
I mean, because, you know, obviously this has a very symmetrical, I like symmetry. This has a very symmetrical look, and then as soon as you add another kind of square to the.
So I actually think, yeah. See, I'm trying to, I think originally the building wasn't symmetrical. I believe, I don't know, I believe the applicant's here, and he can probably explain that better than I can, but, yeah.
Forrest, it looks like it's on page 57 of the packet.
Yeah, it looks like it is a continuation of that plan. It does maintain the symmetry of it.
Maintains the same materials.
Yeah. Any other questions for Sheldon? Great, thank you. Is the applicant here that'd like to provide, is there any additional information you'd like to provide to Planning Commission tonight? If you do, feel free to come forward. Okay. Thank you. All right, this is not up for a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and have a discussion and go from there.
Makes sense to me.
Any thoughts from anyone? Any input? Makes sense?
Moving forward as it was planned.
Yeah,
Yeah, looks good.
sounds like I'll entertain a motion then.
It's item 4.2, right?
Yeah.
Item 4.2, correct.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4.2 with the staff's conditions.
Okay, we got a motion by Brody,
I'll second.
a second by Daryl. Go ahead and call for a vote. We'll start with Andrea,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
and Brody.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time being here. All right, we'll move on to our legislative items tonight. We'll begin with item 5.1. Okay, Clint's got this one. I wondered it was Mike on the list, but we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Clint to present this one to us.
All right. I made the mistake of getting up and doing a public speech without my glasses, so I'm old enough where this has turned into
Here.
this, and now.
Want to borrow mine?
It's good to be with you tonight. The first item that we're going to be talking about tonight is the West Traverse Mountain Plan, called the Compatibility Area Study. The purpose of this request is to adopt the plan as part of the general plan. And that is a recent change in state code. So this year, there was a bill passed that required any municipality within 5,000 feet of a military installation to work with that installation on compatibility within a 5,000-foot buffer, right? And given where Camp Williams is, that's obviously the entity we're talking about tonight. Think about all the development that's taken place. They were created in 1914. Since then, there's been a ton of development that's gone around them, and there's a lot of development pressure even still today. Some of it we'll be talking about a little bit later tonight. So this provision is to basically help maintain that important military installation so they can continue using it as they desire, as they need to train and prepare for emergencies and conflicts and whatnot. So this is the zoning map. You can see on the bottom of that the 5,000-foot buffer where that would affect. A lot of that is within our hillside overlay zone as well, which restricts a lot of development as it is, but a lot of that is also, you can see that bleeding into some of our more dense, higher population or higher density population areas. And so this is the cover of the area study that was done. This study took place over several months last year. The city was invited to it, as well as other municipalities that are affected by Camp Williams. And they went through, what are the provisions, what things should be in this plan, what things shouldn't. And ultimately, they came up with the plan that's been proposed. There's several bits of information in there that we'll touch on a few of those tonight. But some of the things that were kind of the key items of the compatibility study were to identify, reduce, and prevent encroachment, and to strengthen relationships and collaboration between the municipalities and the camp so that those preservation efforts could take place. This is your general map of where Camp Williams is situated. I think we're all familiar with it, where it's at. It borders on several communities: Harriman, Bluffdale, a little bit of Lehigh, Eagle Mountain, Cedar Fort, Saratoga Springs. All those cities are impacted by this same study as well. Some of the information about Camp Williams that I thought was interesting in the study, that it creates 13,000 jobs, it has $477 million in payroll, and has a gross domestic product of $840 million. So those restrictions that they are requesting seem like they the big community is still benefiting from that, right? We're seeing a huge benefit in our economy, and certainly in our safety and security as a nation. So this next map just kind of breaks down the uses of Camp Williams, where certain activities take place. Most of where Harriman is situated, it's a lot of just roads and training areas. We're not so much in the way of artillery or anything like that. And then this is another map that I feel like is one that's very important, and just in terms of land that Camp Williams has identified that they would like to acquire an easement or acquire the property overall to help preserve Camp Williams as it is, and to help them to maintain the training operations that take place at the camp. A lot of this is done through the ACUB program. So that is it's an Army compatible use buffer. So it's essentially where the Army either participates in the purchase of easements or property to help maintain those military operations. So as part of the plan, there's several items that are several kinds of policies and action items that the city needs to participate in. And as part of our adoption of this plan into the general plan, those are additional items that we'll have to look at and implement down the road. Some of them are listed here. The first one is obviously identify those actions that are specific to Harriman. Not everything in the plan may be. Create a land use compatibility map, and then create a military compatibility overlay zone. That was actually, the military compatibility overlay zone was actually on a previous general plan. It just was never adopted. And then appoint a representative of Camp Williams as an advisory member of the Planning Commission. So these are some, like I said, these are some of the policies and procedures and action items that we need to begin to implement. But there are several others in the plan, and that's kind of going back to the first item, just going through the plan as a city and identifying those items and establishing how we're going to accomplish those things. I'm probably not great to answer questions, but if there's anything that you think I might be able to answer, I'd be glad to take a shot at it.
Can we go back to the slide that had the 5,000-foot circles? Let's see, I think there was one more. Well, actually, this one's not bad. The piece that I think catches my attention the most is actually the Rosecrest MDA. There's a lot of overlay there between the two.
And this wouldn't change, what exists now. I think the plan would be, if any further development takes place there, just working with the camp to make sure that it's going to be safe, that it's going to be compatible with what they're trying to accomplish as well. So nothing, what obviously what exists there would be able to stay in place, and residents can continue, to build sheds and.
Well, no, I'm thinking of the future Rosecrest.
Oh.
Some of those areas that get further down into, closer to the camp.
Yeah.
Some of the future Rosecrest, we've seen plans for those, but I don't know. I'm wondering how that might be affected as their plans move forward.
And it may, right? That's part of the process is having that relationship between the camp and the city to identify when these kinds of proposals come up, how do we handle them? What policies can we put in place to kind of get in front of the game as well, maybe? Oh. Yeah, Lauren has studied it more than I have.
Cool. Good.
You might have some information. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, of course. So I read through recently, number one on here, that's identifying stuff for Harriman to do. That's been my job this past week. But I can tell you that with these developments, what they're interested in doing is looking at the height requirements that we have as a city and the height requirements that they require to be able to do their drills and procedures and seeing where those line up. So there is a potential that development that is closer in that buffer area may need to be a little bit shorter to help the noise be able to dissipate a little bit before it gets there. There's also stuff in the, real estate, sorry, I forgot the word. For the real estates and for realtors to need to put in a noise ordinance and say, you are buying a home that is within essentially a flight path. There is going to be noise, and to look to the cities surrounding to kind of work with residents and the camp itself to create programs that we can use to help mitigate those things in those developments that are in that buffer zone.
So on the priority one, on the graphic before, right, oh, go back one more.
Oh.
Right there.
Okay.
So, a lot of the development we're talking about later this evening is within that priority one. So is that priority one them saying that they want to restrict the development that's in those areas, or are they saying that they want to purchase those as a buffer to the camp itself?
I would presume as the map shows it, where that's a priority one, I think it's a ACUB easement.
An easement.
That they would like to place some kind of development easement on there. What that easement entails, I would.
I'm just wondering how the city would react to, large swaths of their city land not being able to be developed because of an easement like that.
The city's supported it in several cases, like all the stuff in the green years prior.
And those are typically in the forestry land use.
So all the hill.
Yeah.
That was originally going to be a Deer Island development.
I think a lot of that takes place, in conversations with the city.
Right. I think,
So-
well, I'm just wondering if like, because in other places where camps and bases, they actually acquire the land itself and create that physical barrier. That way it takes the onus off of the cities, that they maintain it, they do all those other things, and they're not
ACUB
losing
allows for
revenue.
that. ACUB does allow for some of that, and that's how they purchased the one on the hill. So they didn't have that buffer. But I don't know that, Clint, my question is, we're approving basically the idea of creating a zone that discussed this study, right? We're not talking about whether we buy red blocks or pink blocks or green blocks, right?
So we're talking
Do I
about,
understand?
so as the study has been
Yeah.
completed,
Yeah.
we're talking about
Implementing
implementing the
those.
study into the master plan so that we can begin to work on those policies that are within that study.
Which is stuff we needed to do years ago when we first started with this buffer.
Yeah.
A
was a joint-
long time ago, it was, we like a mile buffer. That was what, that's what we used to hear from camp. So the fact that we have this study, to me, we need to implement those as soon as possible so that we can get moving on.
And there is legislation now, right, that was just passed along these lines as well, requiring this type of study to be completed, so we're ahead of the game, I guess, per se, because they just approved that legislation, and this is before us now, because it's been working on before, right? So, yeah.
What is the timeline for the study?
Like, as far as, like
Completing the study, is this a multi-year process?
I don't know that there's a timeline. Is there anything in there on that?
Phone a friend.
All right, so at the end of this study, there are roughly 80 pages of suggestions for implementations to happen. Within those recommendations, they're all rated as different timelines. There's ST, MT, and O. So short time, medium time, and ongoing. And then they're also ranked by priority from low, medium, and high. So working through that, we can see what Harriman is responsible in participating in and look at those different timelines. I can tell you the majority of them are short, which is between 1 and 2 years, but they are smaller projects to work on. And then as it expands, having an ongoing relationship with a member that has been appointed to us is something that's clearly ongoing. But yeah, the majority of them are short-term, but they are fairly short projects. Yeah.
And do other cities have appointed advisory members on their planning commissions?
So I don't believe they currently do, but there is a list of all the cities that are also impacted by this, and their names are also all on those recommendations for having somebody be appointed. And this person is here to just help and advise on the business that specifically deals with Camp Williams. So they're
It's
not.
Camp Williams advisory to our planning commission, not us providing.
Yes.
Okay.
So
they could
Camp
say-
Williams providing guidance to us. Yeah, they're our advisory.
So they could show up and say, hey, this is where our machine gun range is,
Yeah.
or this is where we shoot our 50 cals, so that we
Yeah.
can make logical decisions of development related to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
you
That's
can
where the
say,
fires
maybe we
don't
don't
start.
want a
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
over
Yeah,
here.
hopefully.
Having been evacuated.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
to simplify this concept, you're fine, Lauren. To simplify this concept, essentially the decision here is just, do we want to take into consideration that Camp Williams exists and is there, and that they have suggestions for us, or do we want to ignore it at potential risk of what could happen? Is that essentially what this is, to simplify it?
And basically violate state law.
Right. Okay.
So the
Just
answer is,
simplifying it.
no, we don't.
Correct. Yeah. I just realized this is up for a public hearing. We probably should have had a public hearing before we start a lot of the discussion. So let's go ahead and suspend the discussion for a moment. And go ahead, again, this is for item 5.1, for the discussion consideration of a recommendation to adopt the 2022 West Traverse Mountain Compatibility Area Study for Camp Williams. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing if anybody would like to provide some comment to us. Okay, seeing no comment, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Heather and a second by Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Any further discussion then at this time?
Kind of what Adam said, it feels like we should have had this a long time ago, looking at all the growth that's up within this buffer area. I mean, you look at Eagle Mountain, there's tons of fairly dense development that's been done, Saratoga Springs, so.
And if you look at, I don't know if it's the next slide or whatever, but this ACUB easement priority 1, I believe most of that in the red. If you go to the zoning for it, the overlay that showed our zoning with it. Forget where that one was. Maybe it was back. I don't remember. There you go.
Right there.
So if you notice, it's all mostly
most
within this, forestry.
Yep. Yeah.
Recreation area. Or I mean forestry. Yeah.
The FR zone.
FR zone, correct. That they're
And
looking
some of
at.
that land in the 5,000 foot buffer zone is already owned by Camp Williams,
Correct.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
And some of
Over,
it's under contract to be purchased by Camp Williams.
correct. Correct.
Yeah,
For me, I guess it's a little easier. Do we comply with state law or not?
yeah.
And the
I
study's
feel like
been
we're having a
done
lot of
and-
conversation to say, yes, we want to comply with state law.
Yeah, and again, this is a recommendation to city council. We make a recommendation to city council. It's ultimately city council's decision for that. So if we recommend not to, they'll say, well, we got to obey by state law anyway. But anyhow, this is a recommendation to city council again, so.
I'm ready for a motion.
I guess I would just make one comment that I think we've done a good job at protecting it up
Yeah.
till now
Absolutely.
without this law that we have to comply with.
Yep.
Yep.
But it is a law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that law also mandates more up north for Hill as well, so.
All right, go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move to recommend city council approval of item 5.1.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Adam and a second by Brody. Go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Darrell?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Thank you. That moves forward as a recommendation for approval to city council. We'll move on to item 5.2. Clint's going to be busy tonight. Carry on.
So we're going to handle 5.2 and 5.3 in the
Perfect.
same discussion.
That makes sense. We'll
And I
have two
believe-
separate public hearings, though, for each item, right? We'll have to do it that way, or can we combine public hearings?
I don't know.
I think we have to be
Attorney?
separate, don't we?
Can we
we
have a
combine
combined public hearing
public
for
hearings for
5.2 and 5.3, or do we have to have separate? I'll have separate, okay, that's
Separate
fine.
motions as well.
Yeah,
And I
and
believe that's
separate
how the
motions, correct.
applicant as well wants to handle those, so.
Okay, perfect.
So this is, having just talked about the Camp Williams property, this is in that vicinity. This is a project that we have been working with the applicant with, well, we worked with the applicant with over a good portion of last year on what's called the Laguna Malibu property. The title that they came up with in terms of an MDA would be the Preserve. And the consideration is to rezone this to the LMPC zone. So it's the large master plan community zone. So the subject property is just here south of, on the south end of the city, again up towards the Camp Williams property, in the foothill areas of the city. And this is a better perspective. So this puts those development plans in place to scale where they would be situated. And you can see, so in the pink areas is where the development would take place, and then everything else in that kind of light blue area it would just remain as native. So we're considering two proposals tonight, one from Laguna, one from Malibu. In total, as the preserve, there are about 815 total acres, and they're requesting about 1,300 units maximum. So as part of the process, in meeting with the applicant, design guidelines were talked about and specified. They went into site design, architectural requirements, landscape design that would help preserve homes within those areas from fire danger and to make them appealing and to provide a lot of amenity up there as well. some of the amenities that were talked about were parks, obviously, public and private. The major amenity would probably be trailheads and trail connections in that area, and connection to additional foothill property for additional trails. This map on the right-hand side kind of show those green areas. That's where the potential parks would be possibly located. So in terms of consideration with our ordinance, there's 4 things that we look at: consistency with the general plan, harmony with overall character of existing development, adverse effects on the adjacent property, and adequacy of facilities and services intended to serve the property. And we'll go through each one of them individually and address those. So the first one is consistency with the general plan. So at the time of application, the general plan 2025 was the plan in place. That general plan allowed for a density of 0.4 units per acre maximum. The applicant is requesting 1.56 units per acre, which is an increase of about 942 units up in the foothills. Again, as we mentioned earlier tonight, the map also showed some of that area as a military compatibility overlay. That was never obviously implemented, but the intent, I would understand, is that would restrict development in that area based off of the needs of Camp Williams. So in this regard, the proposal does not comply with the general plan. This is the 2025 plan. You can see the properties outlined in red are the properties that we're looking at. And then that green hatched area at the bottom, that's the military compatibility overlay. The densities, most of the density is located in that open space and resort recreational zone. And those are the densities that are only allowed up to 0.4 units per acre. So looking at it with the new general plan, just as a matter of interest, is it consistent with what we just recently adopted this year? The same density is still in place, the 0.4 units per acre. So again, the proposal as proposed does not comply with the current general plan either. So the second item we look at is harmony with the overall character of existing development. A lot of the development that they're proposing to construct is in the undeveloped hillside. And currently we have a hillside overlay zone in place. And I'm going to read the purpose of that. It's to preserve as much of the existing natural beauty as is feasible and still allow for compatible development. So obviously an increase of 942 units over the foothill area there. Looking out to the foothills from where we're at now, we probably see a lot more development than with what is in place now, the 0.4 units per acre maximum. So the increase of units does not preserve the hillside, and we do not feel it's in harmony with the character of the existing developments there. The third consideration to analyze is the adverse effects on adjacent property, and this is where we get into that compatibility with Camp Williams. As was mentioned, I think, by one of the commissioners, the property that is being proposed tonight is within the Priority 1 ACUB area, easement area. With a lot more development in that area, there's obviously impacts not only to the residents that live there, but also impacts to the military installation on them continuing to be able to use their property for the services that we need. So in that respect as well, staff does not feel the proposal is compatible, but it is impactful to both residents and the camp. And then the fourth one is in regards to adequacy of facilities and services intended to serve the property. So there's a list there of things that you need for a development in terms of services: roadways, police, fire, water, sewer, all those utility services need to be in place. That was one of the major conversations that we had with the development group at the time. There was never a feasibility study done to show how this would be proposed. There were some ideas thrown around, but nothing ever really stuck, so to speak. So putting that much population in that area that's currently, quite a distance away from the city would obviously increase the city's cost in terms of maintenance of those roads, of those water lines, of those police and fire services. And it does create a financial burden for the city to provide those necessary services. So our recommendation, based off of those findings, is that we did not deny the proposed rezone to apply for the LMPC zone to the Laguna Malibu area. And our findings are here below. If there's any questions on what we've gone through tonight, I'd be glad to answer what I can.
And this may be a question for legal, but the Camp Williams thing, the city hasn't passed yet.
Correct.
And so technically, we can't use that as an excuse not to rezone, or that shouldn't even be a question on today's.
Are we allowed to consider that?
Except for the fact that there's a law.
I mean, that's
passed,
like
right?
saying we're gonna do a general plan in the future that's gonna accommodate for Camp Williams, so we can make decisions on that future general plan. We can't do that.
So I would understand, so whenever we look at a conditional use, for example, right? What is the uses of the surrounding property that's taking place? Even though there might not be a specific plan, if you're putting a business next to a residential area, you can still consider those impacts. In this regard, they're putting a residential area next to a military installation. I think that we can, maybe if we can't use, I think the study gives us a little more.
The study helps us with the law that's
Yeah,
been passed.
the study,
right?
the study helps us, even gives us more information, right? There've been all these studies done.
Right.
And so we have an idea of what area the camp needs to preserve the operations that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so the question is how does this development impact other developments? So the study is just an item of information.
Sure.
So even though it hasn't
We
been-
can't base decisions off of something that's not passed, like in the general plan, because,
Right.
yeah, okay.
But the law,
Yeah, I
right,
think
the
we're just
Utah,
using the study as information.
That's why I think we need to hear what Matt says.
Yeah. Well, obviously. Yeah.
So that was one thing I was going to ask is the camp, I know can get public notification, but did we notify the camp of this meeting? Like physically do a mailer to them?
To who?
Camp
To
Williams?
the camp.
But to who?
It would be the base commander of
Base
Camp
engineer.
Williams. So that's just something I was going to ask. I didn't see any camp members here. And
Okay, so they were notified.
just curious.
Okay, I had a question similar to Forrest. If you go back to the general plan slide. Okay, on this one, it has the military compatibility overlay. And I understand the adoption, not adoption issue. Part of the property in question is within that, part of it is not.
Correct.
Do we have to, so could that mean that the part that is not in the military overlay is, fits within the zone that's there? So it's not encumbered by by military?
Right, and currently there's not a military overlay. We don't have that in place now. I
Right,
was
but
just
in
showing.
the 25 plan, it shows military
yeah.
overlay on part of it,
Right.
but not the other part.
Right, so part of that is not encumbered, correct.
So it's not encumbered by military
Right.
overlay, officially. Okay.
but I'm a little confused because the 5,000-foot buffer that was passed.
Right,
Right.
that will go to the council, and the council may or may not adopt to meet the state law.
State
but
law.
It's not in place yet, and that's what Forrest was saying earlier. It's kind of a technical procedural question, I guess.
So Chair, I'm wondering if maybe we should
Sounds like we're.
get public comment before we start
That's
continuing down the road a
probably
little
That's a
bit?
good idea.
Just
That's a great
something
discussion.
The applicant is here
ensure
as
that
well.
we don't.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a very good point. That's,
And we need to ask if the.
yeah, we need to move forward with the proceedings here procedurally. We'll give the applicant an opportunity to come forward at this time and provide any additional information that you'd like to, for the Planning Commission. We'll keep moving forward here.
Thank you, Planning Commission. My name's Reed Dixon. I'm with Infinity Consultants, and I represent the project tonight. We've been working on this for over 2 years, and I actually was involved in the de-annexation of this property from Bluffdale back in 2007. We worked on that for about almost 2 years. So starting in end of 2005 and 2006, we started doing that. So there are a few people who have seen the full spectrum of how this property has been, kind of treated for a long, long time. So in 2007, there was about 4,000 plus acres that were removed from Bluffdale and annexed into Harriman City. And these properties are not entirely in that annexation, but about 85 or 90% of the property is. And at the time that was annexed into Harriman City, there were specific activities or specific ways that it was brought into the city. These are the minutes from 2007, back when the property was brought into the city. And basically, they were brought into the city with the understanding that they would not just be held as open space or held as preservation areas or treated as public spaces for trails or parks, but that they were to be brought in private property owners so that they could use their property. There was an actual quote concerning how they were brought in. The City Council shall assign a land use zone or a variety thereof to territory annexed to the city at the time of the territory is annexed. If the City Council fails to assign a land use zone at the time the territory is annexed, the annexed territory shall be deemed to be in the A1 zone immediately upon annexation, unless the property is located adjacent to the hillside overlay zone, in which case it shall be zoned FR5. In the minutes from when this property was annexed into the city, it was talked about that certain properties that had gone farther ahead in the planning process were zoned according to those plans that they had. And those projects are ongoing now. Malibu and Laguna didn't have any plans. They were just assigned these holding zones. And they were called holding zones when the property was annexed, with the implication that once, and specifically stated in the minutes, that once development plans were brought forward, that rezones would be made. So we applied for an LMPC application, and the large project master plan community was adopted, I think, in '21, and I was here for that as well. And it was discussed at length that it was a very valuable tool for the city to get what you want, because there were people up here who said, what do we get? When we develop, the developers are always getting what they get, it seems. They're very savvy at doing that, or they wouldn't do it. But the city sometimes feels like they get manipulated or cheated sometimes. And so they're saying, the city is saying, what do I get? What do we get? And the LMPC ordinance is the perfect tool for a developer and a city to negotiate back and forth and to discuss and to be creative and to basically say, how do we make it not just a win-win, but how do we make it 3 or 4 or 10 wins for everybody involved? And so we proceeded to make this application of the LMPC. There are only about 4 properties in the whole city, and one of them already developed, Olympia, and 2 of them are us, Malibu and Laguna, and there's one more that's probably in the works. But the whole thing, you can't even apply for LMPC unless you're at least 200 acres. And when that provision was put in the LMPC ordinance, it specifically was made 200 acres so that we would qualify. And lots of the little properties would develop according to existing ordinance. But the LMPC ordinance was almost specifically adopted so that the city could be creative and the developer could be creative and everybody could get what they want, in essence. So we made that application. And it was expensive and thorough and big. So this is just a sampling of what we submitted. I didn't bring the whole book. But we performed slope analysis, we looked at existing topo, we looked at the hillside ordinance, we looked at all the infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, storm, secondary. We looked at trails, we looked at the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, we looked at parks, we looked at all kinds of amenities. We looked at safety, we looked at fire, we looked at evacuation plans, we looked at right-of-way widths, we looked at pedestrian connectivity, we had hierarchy of trails, we had 4 or 5 different types. We looked at detention, we looked at infiltration, we looked at wildlife habitat. The list goes on and on, I can't do it all. But we were very, very thorough, and we had working groups with 2 of the Planning Commission and 2 of the City Council in 2 different working groups. One was engineering and one was planning. And we went through all of these items in detail. I don't know if you can see it, you don't need to, but our roads and our development don't touch areas that are in excess of 30% slope. Yes, it's in the hillside zone. Yes, it preserves hillsides. Over half of it, about 60%, preserves open space. The alternative, this property will develop one way or another. There's probably 3 different approaches we could take, and I'll discuss the other 2 at the end. This is by far Plan A. This is by far the best way for the city to derive what it wants. What do we get? It's the best way, it's the best tool for that to happen. The others are not very flexible, the conventional approach or being adopted into some other MDA. We don't like those 2. We love Plan A. That's why we're here, staying optimistic, even though we have a recommendation from staff to not approve. So, just to show you how specific we got, I just have a couple of examples because I want you to appreciate, if you can, the level of detail. This is an exhibit on when sidewalks are required on both sides of a street, when sidewalks could be wider than 5 feet, when they could be placed on one side of a street, or when sidewalks could be replaced by meandering trail systems and other pedestrian connectivity. So we talk about all the ways that this could be done. We talk about all types of different driveway requirements for when an individual lot develops, and we have all different product types, large lot, medium, small. We only had 1 small pot of multifamily that was down near another area. The rest is all single. But we have details on how driveways could be done with different types of patterns and materials. We have a whole chapter on retaining and how that's to be done so it looks nice and is compatible and landscaped and safe and stable. We have a whole multiple chapters on architecture. We would have theming, whether it be for large, medium, or small type lots. There's different requirements for each so that it's compatible. It's not too high. It's not reflective. It's not on a ridge line. One house doesn't stare at another house for privacy. One house is not huge and the other one's short or small. We have theming and compatibility throughout. There's standards on chimneys and roofs, windows, porches, decks, solar panels. One of the best parts, when a large lot develops, it can't even develop its entire area. So say that's a 3/4 acre lot in this figure. The area outside is left native or restored and reclaimed back to native if it was graded. The next area closest to the house is a xeriscape transition zone. And then only this small area around the house, we're talking hundreds of square feet, not thousands, would be formally landscaped and fully irrigated. This is a water preservation technique. It's also highly attractive visually. No fences. These are more like home sites. not lots, even though they are platted as lots. They function like home sites where a home is situated just right so that it has good views and doesn't obstruct another. I'm trying to go quickly because this is 2 years' worth of effort, and I don't want to take too much time. Our LMPC application not only looked at all these design techniques and issues and hillside preservation and open space preservation, but it also looked at finance. It was mentioned in the presentation, and it's been a concern of the city all along, and I think the city just adopted a PID ordinance that basically said, after extensive review and study, we have figured out that we are in favor of PIDs. PIDs are a financial mechanism that basically says, when a project like this develops, if there are X amount of units, if they're small, medium, and large, it can be prorated. But the overall cost of the backbone infrastructure is divided by those units and borne by those units when they develop, so that the city's impact fees and the city's tax revenues are not touched, whether it be for initial installation or whether it be for operation and maintenance. So we basically said, this was before the city adopted their PUD ordinance, and they still might have had questions at the time. But we basically went through and did a study on what the costs would be and what the O&M would be, and showed the city, here's what it would be for a large, medium, or small lot in terms of, it feels like an impact fee, even though it's not that. And then it can have some ongoing for O&M. But the point of this project, we've always promised the city, whether it be snow plowing or additional travel time for emergency response, even a small station there if someone needs to go, if the police need to have a place to fingerprint somebody or hold them while they're investigating or whatever they need to do, we could provide that. We could provide other civic things as well. If there needs to be a small public works facility for snowplow or sand or backhoe or whatever, we're open to that as well. And so we showed how the project would be self-sustaining and not be a financial drag. And that was presented here that it would be, or probably would be, but we're in the LMPC application that we have represented, we have always committed to self-financing and bearing the costs. Some might say the devil's in those details, and they are. And so we're committed to developing an agreement that crosses every T and dots every I, whether it be for design guidelines, or whether it be for infrastructure design, or whether it be for financing, or whether it be for fire safety, or any of these issues. We're ready to write a book that's an inch thick or two, whatever it needs to be, so that no one's relying on what somebody said a decade ago, so that everyone can look at chapter and verse and do what we agreed to do. We're committed to spending the time and the effort to get it that good, because previous MDAs might have had ambiguity. I've heard people be pretty negative about some of these MDAs and be very reluctant to go to another one. But actually, the LMPC ordinance was adopted for that very reason, so that you could adopt a very good MDA. Camp Williams, one of the reasons that was mentioned is that, well, let me back up. One of the reasons that was mentioned is that the character of the project would be incompatible with the surrounding properties. If you look up there right now, there's a lot of sand and gravel operation, there's a lot of mass grading, there's a lot of disturbance, there's a lot of things, and all those things in time will be developed in a beautiful way. But if you really think about the compatibility of the design and character of what we're proposing, it's to never disturb all that stuff in the first place. So there's no time lag. Basically, we would develop not on 30% slopes, backbone infrastructure, and we would develop each pod as we go, so that as it's disturbed, it's restored and occupied. What you have now is a very large project that has been massively disturbed, and it eventually will be massively occupied. But I think the city doesn't really like the lag time. This wouldn't have any lag time. So actually, this is not compatible, meaning it's not the same as, but it's much better than what's what's been going on in the past. The other is Hillside, we've already talked about. The third is the financing, which we've talked about, and we're committed to doing that. So the other is this Camp Williams. We have met extensively with Camp Williams. They have a person who's in charge of this kind of, in charge of go-between with the camp and private landowners. And the city has a program where they enjoy Juniper and other places where they've acquired lands with ACUB funding. And they have momentum there where they enjoy the funds from the Army so that they can preserve lands and acquire lands and provide amenities and trails and all kinds of great things. And we're in favor of this too. But our client, the property owner, would like to use his property. He's actually not really interested in selling his property. And so we met with Camp Williams on many occasions. And when we met with them, their first response was, well, we'd rather it be acquired and left open. Well, we understand that. That makes it very easy for them. But what could be done so that both private property owner and the mission of the military can be both accomplished? Isn't that great if we could both win? And so we looked at it we drilled down and very specifically said, where are your activities along our border? Are there certain areas that are more sensitive than others? And well, of course they are. We have a setup here and we have a setup over here. And at certain times of the year we do this, and sometimes at night we do another thing. And then we looked at our property, and sometimes the development is protected by topography. There'll be actually a hill or a mountain between them and us. And the camp's not worried about that. But sometimes there is a place where there's exposure directly from our development area right across a canyon to where they do have activities. And so the alternatives were discussed. We can pull development back and create a buffer. We can create staggered so that the units directly in front have enhanced architectural products, certain windows, certain siding, certain sound attenuation. And then the interior units are actually buffered from the exterior. We can have access to those buffers for fire attenuation to make it even safer now than it is now. And we came to all of these. They were going to do a yearly outreach. And this representative went back and met with his general, and the general said, good. Those mitigation measures sound adequate. And so we wrote this email to city administration all about that, and were never responded to. Because the city basically enjoys buying very low-cost land with federal money to put up infrastructure or to put up amenities. Our project proposes heavy amenitization, trails, all kinds of trails for the public, open spaces and parks, and even other things. We provided space for, potentially, for a shooting range if the police wanted to train, and even private training. Another city council person suggested a space with incredible views out on a peninsula for a reception center or a restaurant. Those weren't for sure, but those were ideas. We're ready to do schools. We're ready to do churches. We're ready to do an amphitheater. Whatever the city wants, we're ready to talk about within reason. But the Camp Williams thing has been used as a reason to say no, when in reality, we came up with a way to be good neighbors, and they agreed verbally to do that. We even showed how some of our open space, some of these green areas, could be acquired with ACUB funding if the city wanted to own them, but we're planning on dedicating them anyway. So that's a savings for everyone if we just do it. The Camp Williams Joint Land Use Study even talks about these mitigation measures that we can follow to mitigate the impacts that they have in their mission, and we fully support their mission. We had a community meeting, and I'll wrap up with that. We had a community meeting, 27 people were there. I gave a presentation similar to this one, talking about all the amenities and design guidelines and the quality of the project under the LMPC ordinance. And basically, the residents who were there basically said, what about our access to these areas? Because we enjoy the trails and we enjoy the use and we enjoy the views. And and I reminded them, well, first of all, the word preserve is a little bit funny because this is private property. And I think in the West, we kind of take open space for granted that we can all just go use it. And we would like to preserve, we would like to allow, we would like to provide all these trails and open spaces for everyone. But I reminded the residents that right now there really isn't any access. It's private property. No hunting, no fires, no trash, no driving, no things like that. So they were concerned. They said, well, what can we do? And I said, well, try to support the project, because the project wants to put in trailheads and trails and open spaces. Again, 60% is preserved, never to be touched, not just reclaimed, but never graded, never touched in its native condition. And so at the end of this, there were 5 or 6 of those residents that came up and said, oh, I'm an avid mountain biker, or I like to trail run, or I really like to go up on top with my horse and go over here. And I said, well, we want to keep doing that. So I'll end with those things. There were also some numbers thrown around, and there were so many numbers during the whole process that I can see why there'd be a little bit of confusion on the number of units and the density. Even the acres, we haven't even done a formal survey of the whole property because it's very large. It's about 900 acres when you combine the two projects. But just for a number that you can have in your head, the 914 units comes out to just barely above 1 unit per acre gross. I know there have been other numbers thrown around, but I'm just saying that we're like at 1.03 units per acre. So it's just barely above 1. And so when this was annexed into the city, circling back, the number of 4.5 is how all these other guys came in. And we're not anywhere near that. We've done traffic studies. We've done impact studies on all the water, sewer, storm drain, all of it. Engineering, I don't know if they're even here, but engineering, no big issues. We can accommodate if we can just build. Engineering was the easy part. It was the planning part that had people's opinions that might be different. So I strongly encourage you to embrace the LMPC ordinance. We don't want to do a conventional subdivision where we just lot the thing out and don't have any access or any open space. We don't want to be adopted into another MDA because those MDAs are what they are and we don't have an opportunity to create something different. We'd much rather create something very different that the city loves and that we also love. So we look forward to your questions and ongoing conversation. We'd like to come up with a really grand solution that we can all adopt.
Thank you, Reed. That was very thorough. Is there any questions for the applicant at this time?
I don't have any.
Okay.
I guess I have one, Andy. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
go ahead.
You've been in conversation with Camp Williams. You have a verbal acknowledgement, the email. Do you have anything more official from Camp Williams? A letter from them saying that we take no exception to this, or?
Well, take no exception is probably a strong, they might not like that type of phraseology, truthfully. But here's how it went. We met with them on 3 or 4 occasions and had conversations back and forth on what would work well. And I outlined very carefully in an email back to them, and I said, could you please confirm by response to this email that you agree with the representations I make in my email? And the response was, sure, let me coordinate with my people, and sure, I'll do that. And through the grapevine, then later on, word came back that he was asked to not communicate with us anymore.
He being the Camp Williams representative?
Right. I think there's certain folks here at the city who have a great agenda to do more ACUB acquisitions, and they would really like this to be one of those. The property owners would really like to not sell their property and not be obligated to sell it. And by the way, the whole general plan, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, a year ago, many times, we tried to have input on the general plan, and basically we're just stonewalled. The general plan says right in it that we take into account the interests of property owners. We would like to hear from the public, but we'd also like to hear, of course, from the property owners. So when these designations are put up here, it wasn't with any input whatsoever from these property owners. So we understand what the general plan shows. It's highly strategic if you want to acquire open space with ACUB funding to designate it on your general plan as open space with a crummy zoning. Makes it easier to acquire it with ACUB funding. But our landowner is committed to developing it one way or another. He's not very interested in selling. So again, Camp Williams gave us a verbal, and we'd have to pick up and continue forward if we need to get more official on that. But they weren't not willing to put something in writing because they were asked not to. So that's a little bit of a sore point, but we feel like there's definitely a win-win where the city wants to acquire open spaces for people to enjoy trails and to preserve, vegetation and wildlife habitat and places to recreate. We're offering to give that to the city for free as part of this whole thing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll let you take a seat. Okay, so just
I
as
have a question real quick for him.
Sure.
Sorry. So this is more kind of drilling down to the specifics. In your design guidelines, which I think are good, they do a good job of trying to create a vision of the type of architecture and things that you want to see. I am a little concerned that, like in the beginning of your presentation, it's going to be a mixed use kind of development. It's not going to be just residential. In fact, it states that right in your application and in the design review guidelines. But there isn't anything regarding commercial architecture. It's all based on residential architecture. Is there a reason that there is anything commercial?
There's no commercial proposed except for possibly a reception center or a shooting facility. And those came along after the design guidelines were prepared.
So how is it considered mixed use then, a mixed use development?
It's mixed because it has large, medium, small, multifamily.
That's not a definition of mixed use though. That's mixed types of residential. Mixed use is residential, commercial.
Well, is a reception
retail.
center commercial?
Okay,
So it has commercial.
okay, so just the one.
I think we
the one
understand
element.
where he's coming from here, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
just the one element. Okay,
Okay.
I just want to be clear because
Yeah.
it was stated in the beginning and then I just saw residential, residential, residential. So.
Yeah, and so the design guidelines were an ongoing effort, and we're here tonight to request LMPC zoning overlay on the property so that we can go back and
Right.
perfect those design guidelines.
And that's why I wanted to ask you. so that-
They're not, I would consider those design guidelines to be 80% or something like that. I mean, there's work to do. Like I said, we're ready to cross every T and dot every I like you're asking about. To make them perfect would be a bummer if we get turned down.
Then I also have one quick question. You mentioned in your work, back to Camp Williams, you mentioned in your work with them that you discussed that buffer zone, so to speak, with them, and that you could potentially shift some things around to negotiate with that zone. But in looking at your map, it looks like the vast majority of the density of your development proposal is, I'm just rough shooting 70 or so % plus is in that zone. And then you were mentioning that a lot of your roads are on the more flat areas. So how would that negotiation work if you'd have to move those roads and most of that development away from those flat areas into the steeper areas, so to speak, or less developable.
You just referred to a zone. Which zone are you referring to?
No,
It means area by zone.
That buffer zone that was described by the military, you said you were talking with them?
The military compatible overlays area?
Yeah, the
There's a
compatibility
military
overlay.
compatibility overlay, and then there's the 5,000-foot buffer.
Right, so
Those
I
are
wasn't
two
being
different things.
specific to those exact zones.
Yeah.
Or those exact
Okay.
buffers. I was talking with them, we were talking with them about buffers that we would mutually agree to.
Okay, so you were.
Because if you
when
talk about a
use the word buffer,
5,000-foot
you're
buffer, that's almost a mile.
Right,
I mean, that's an unbelievable swath.
okay. So see, I was confusing, because when you'd said, we talked to them about buffer zones, I had assumed you were referring to that same buffer zone. So
No.
you're saying two different buffer zones, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, as a reminder, this is open for a public hearing. And again, as a reminder, we've received a handful of comments that will be read in, or not read in, but will be included in the minutes for this. So we will not read them at this time, but they have been provided to all of us as a planning commission prior to this meeting. We have reviewed them and studied these comments as well. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing, but as a reminder, this is we're going to have two different public hearings. We're going to have one for item 5.2, which is for the Laguna area, and then we'll have a second public, and then we'll go through our motions with that one. And again, these motions will be for a recommendation to City Council. This is us as a planning commission. The ultimate say for this will be City Council. And then we'll go ahead and have that motion for 5.2, then we'll do a public hearing for 5.3 and have a motion for 5.3 as well. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing for item 5.2 for the Laguna property area. And please just state your name for the record.
Sir, my name is Paul Butler. I live just south of Juniper Crest Road, immediately north of the proposed area. In addition to all of the reasons presented by the staff not to approve it, the presenter who just discussed didn't really address the adverse effects on the existing properties, such as the near-term effects of the dust that results from the construction area. That's given the number of properties and the amount of construction, that would be many years long impact on dust. And then there's also the effect of impact on roads due to construction, damage to roads, and also the obstruction. There's not a lot of roads in that area, north-south access roads, and so they put a lot of demand on the existing roads. There was mention of flat areas. There aren't very many flat areas back there. It's mostly gullies and hills. And another point I wanted to make, I can't remember what it was. There's a lot of exposed rock back there, so there'd be a lot of blasting, which would contribute to the dust effects. So for those and you didn't address the long-term effects of the increased traffic through the area. So in addition to the reasons for the denial presented by the staff, I also had these additional comments, and I hardly endorse the recommendation to deny the approval for both those projects.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Anyone else who would like to make a comment? Please come forward, state your name. Thank you.
Connor Buxton. I think the bottom line is that this development's irresponsible. I think it's, as residents of Harriman, we all know there's not very good east-west or north-south corridors to get to I-15, Bangerter. the major highways, throughways in the valley. The other thing that I'm concerned with is that developers, they're most concerned with profits for their stakeholders. And so I am concerned that the altruism that that the applicant has expressed to support the city in the facilities and infrastructure will come down to the very bare minimum and will not support long-term growth of the city and future developments for the city. So, talked a lot about open space and trail access. That's very important to me, but not this way. This is not, I don't think this is the correct path for that. So, thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing for item 5.2.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for item 5.2.
I have a motion by Heather.
I'll second it.
Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The public hearing is,
For me.
okay. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time for item 5.2.
Are we doing 5.3's public hearing, or are we doing a vote on 5.2? That's, I just didn't know what the plan was.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have to have a separate action on item 5.2 before we move on to item 5.3, if I remember right. Yeah, it keeps it cleaner. That being said, we do provide an opportunity for the applicant to come up after the public hearing and provide any additional comments. So Reed, if there's anything you would like to present based on comments that were presented, feel free to do so at this time, if you want to. So again, to address any of the comments that were made during the
Well,
public
the only
hearing.
thing I kind of wondered about is you said you received written comments, and if any of I don't have access to those, so if there's any questions or issues that were raised in those submitted comments, I'd be happy to answer or address.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comments that, well, the couple of comments you heard tonight are pretty much reflected in these comments as well.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so,
As
yeah.
far as east-west corridor is concerned, there are substantial, huge east-west corridor roadways under construction now. So if you look at the traffic study that we've done, and if you look at what's proposed now in terms of a backbone road that goes right to Porter Rockwell, that's under construction now and this summer. So I know there's frustration with traffic the way it is right now today, but with what's being proposed, it would greatly improve.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and have further discussion then by Planning Commission for item 5.2. Any thoughts, discussion points we want to bring up?
I had one thought as far as an approach. Maybe we do go through and discuss items 1 through 4 as Clint presented them. Yeah.
Yep.
So if we were to go through each one, we could talk about each one.
Let's do it. So let's start. So the first item that was brought up was that the concern was that the proposal is not consistent with the adopted general plan or zoning designation.
So I was gonna say, related to that, this zone has always been that way. We've always planned on open space forever.
On this one.
I've never, in my entire use of working with Harriman City since 2003, I've never not seen it, this type of use. So,
And I would add to that, with the comment about not having input into the general plan this year, we've been in discussion with the property owners for quite some time before that plan was implemented. So we were aware, I think the city was well aware of what was proposed to be on that property. And I think the approval of what was approved as part of the general plan was reflective of what the city would like to see on that property. So, I mean, everybody has a say in the general plan. Whether or not your say gets approved or not by the city council is up to them.
Yeah.
So, but I would say that the city council was very aware. They were not ignorant of what was taking place on the property.
As well as the planning staff as well was very aware.
Correct.
While they were working through the general plan also.
But back to 20 years of history, it's been 0.4 units per acre for 20 years?
This one's open space.
It has been open space,
Open space.
that, as far as I can remember.
But 0.4, but then part of it is 0.4 units per acre and has been for 20 years?
Sorry?
0.4 units per acre and it has been for 20 years?
There was a discussion, the point 4.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay.
Well, was it FR or open space? I guess either one.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the planning, or on the general zone,
And
or
again,
general plan?
it was
or
always
zoning?
the general plan that we're
General
talking
plan.
about, so I don't know that we ever, like, general plans typically don't get to exact density.
That's
Yeah.
true.
So just to be clear, I don't think it ever outlined that.
It was the zoning
All
plan
I'm
that
saying
wasn't-
is the general plan that we're seeing now in this area has been consistently the same general plan
For 20
But
years.
open space.
for as long as I can remember.
Okay.
And we could have staff always go and prove that if we want, but.
And it's essentially been from kind of the top ring of the Bonneville shoreline down is kind of where development's always.
Correct. So the buffer area, and this gets into that, has always been a concern, always. I don't think we ever had a study that proved it, or any state mandate that required it, which is why I think we're finally getting there. Again, remember, 20 years ago, Harriman was a lot different.
Yes, it was. I
We
was
weren't
here.
even close to these areas, and I don't think anybody thought we'd be close to these areas. And so I do remember when Deer Island came in.
I was
with
gonna
the
ask you about
ACUP
that.
ACUP funding. This was a huge topic related to the buffer. And at the time, they were proposing, I swear it was, this is where I'd hate to quote what my memory is because it's starting to get long, but it was a far distance. It was not, I wouldn't say it was 2 miles, but I can't remember exactly. It was a decent amount of buffer. And when I worked for the city staff, we actually hiked that area, so I only can go by Deer Island, and actually went up to the camp's property and saw where the property was going to be. And that was when the concern of the camp was brought up. And that's why I was interested why camp wasn't here, because in the past, they were very adamant about that. And I know sometimes it's harder to notify a big government entity until you have the right person. So that's why I was
Was
just,
that back around 2006 or was that?
Deer
Deer
Island, I left the city in 2007, so it's probably about
Thanks for letting me
2005,
pick your brain, by the way.
2005, 2006.
Yep, 2005 and 6, okay.
This is when I know Deer Island, and that's all I know related to that topic. But for me, on the general plan, to me, we've always planned
Always
it to
planned
not
that.
be that area. So I kind of agree with city staff's recommendations. Also, I'd like to point out, I've worked with staff since about that time in some way, form, or capacity. I have never seen them deny a project, just so you know. This is one of the first. Ever, that I remember.
Should we continue down the other bullet points as well? We'll continue those discussions as a planning commission. So again, the concern is that the proposal is not in character with the surrounding property. And that
Can
was
we-
brought up in the
Sorry,
hearing as
can we
well.
go back to the screen that shows those?
Oh, yeah, can you
Yes.
bring those up on this?
Those 4 items, yeah. Perhaps. Yeah. So essentially, there's, and that was one of the comments that we heard as well, is not in character with the surrounding property as well, so.
I think if we go to number 2.
What, did you
next
want to
one.
go to a specific slide, or?
No, just as a reminder to us.
Oh, number 2, there you go.
So, I
Those are
agree.
the, Public comments.
I mean, there's
I'm
nothing
gonna-
around it, so.
Actually, I'll
It's
jump
not
in
gonna
on
be
this one
compatible.
and maybe say,
Go ahead, Jackson.
speak in favor of the project. That I think, I've gone up there and hiked it. Sorry.
Same here.
I may have strayed while jogging. But
private
there's
property, but
actually
yeah.
quite a bit of flat area up there. And it'd be easy to put that many units up there and avoid the hillsides. So as far as steep hillsides, I think there's plenty of space to do that up there.
Yeah.
But when I hiked it as well, years ago, I agree that there is some flat areas. It's more getting to the flat areas that is the concern that I noticed. So it's more the
grades.
Yeah,
and
so
the-
grades to,
the grades getting up there.
what you cross, again, I wasn't looking at it from a development perspective nor how they proposed it.
You were huffing and puffing as you came up. that
Exactly.
canyon.
Watching my son run up the hill and feeling old. But what I noticed is to get there, that's where I would say it disrupts the intent of that hillside. No different than, again, going back to that Deer Island analogy, that's how I look at it. Deer Island was pretty flat at the very top. It's carving the mountain road to get up there, and that we all see still to this day, that was more of that same kind of concept. So that's where, to me, it doesn't meet that intent by disrupting to get there. But I could see where there could be a few homes, that absolutely.
On that, on that same point, that was what I was kind of pointing out too, is most of that flat land is on that far south end, from my understanding.
Oh, closer to Camp Williams?
That butts up right on the border with Camp Williams. That's where most of the flat land is, whereas the sloped land is more of that northern side of the development. And so that's where I was kind of bringing up in my concern previously, is it seems like in order to be more compatible with the Camp William concerns, there would be no way to move that flat land.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, from what I
you
see, I like how much open space they have. Obviously, they're not going to build where they can't, it's too slopey. But yeah, one of my concerns is just getting, I don't know, it's a little tricky where it's, a public, Camp Williams is trying to dictate to a private landowner what they can do with their land. But I don't know, living in Harriman, not even close to the zone, I've experienced them, I think, blasting stuff over in Camp Williams, and there's disturbance
My house
for sure.
has been evacuated by fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have worries about, I guess, what city amenities they would offer if they said, that's what I would like to see, right? If they're open to having fire and police and things like that, like I want to see it as part of their proposal.
And a big one for me, as far as Harmony, of course, is being able to take care of the residents that are there.
Yeah.
So when the fire comes, is there a fire station there?
Correct.
As well as can they evacuate residents?
And can they have the water?
Ingress
Yeah,
and
yeah.
egress related to that.
And I'd be concerned about infrastructure and having your water amenities up there to be able to accommodate and take care of the.
So are we done with?
When that does happen.
Just
So-
because somebody said, let's go through this order, are we done
Yeah.
with this one?
Let's keep going on this one a minute.
I'm
A
just
lot
saying,
of
does
those-
anybody have issues with this one?
A lot of those points that you're bringing up, the infrastructure, the fire, the police, whatever, those are gonna have to be solved before they get their development signed off anyways.
Correct.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those aren't things that they're just gonna
That's like every
ignore.
development.
Let's be clear, that's not something they're gonna ignore.
Yeah,
School district.
And I agree with you. A lot of that is, engineering decisions, architectural decisions. I know from an engineering view, flat is relative. But it seems like the residents up in that area, that most of their comments stemmed around access, getting from existing infrastructure to the site, so traffic concerns. We had one gentleman that's a CERT member of our community, volunteer for emergency preparedness, and he was concerned with evacuation. We're not strangers to emergencies here in Harriman. They happen and they'll continue to happen. So I would just think, I'm not saying yay or nay at this point, but it would have been helpful if we would have had maybe a phasing plan to see how they're actually planning to phase this construction. To me, traffic would be the first thing, the infrastructure in place.
Well, is there 2 access points for egress?
Yeah, utilities
Are
would
they
be a
large
big thing.
enough to
Are they?
egress that
Do they
amount?
have capacity? Yeah,
And does that work with the Harmony?
correct.
So does anybody have any more concerns about Harmony with this topic number 2,
I just have another comment, because
related to it?
I just feel like, there's lots of developments on the east side that are similar to this, as far as infrastructure, I guess I'd like to know more from the city as far as it's going to be a lot more impact, more expensive,
Well, does
or you get to get utilities up there.
Does it take a
Well, and
Suncrest-style 4-lane road going all the way up there in order to get people out?
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and again, those will all have to be similar to what Forrest was saying.
So
They'll have to be
in
worked
regards
through.
to this number 2.
Yeah, the
focusing
hillside,
on-
we're talking about
Hillside,
focusing on
hillside
number two,
overlay zone.
There's
yeah.
a whole other
the
topic
harmony
related
of
to
the
all that
overall
other stuff.
character existing development. So if you look just across the ridge, on the other side of the ridge, this would be a little bit less dense than what's going on around the southern end and the northern end. I'm sorry, the eastern end and the northern end of that ridge. So I don't think that that is an issue when it comes to harmony with the overall character of existing development.
I'll agree with you, because Suncrest is a lot more dense than.
Oh, yeah.
Or not Suncrest, Rosecrest, sorry.
Rosecrest,
Is a lot
exactly.
more dense.
And
than
that's
this
just on the other side of the ridge.
one. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to item 3 on these recommendations. Thank you. So adverse effects on adjacent property.
So this one to me is a little loaded because the law just passed, and so we're still seeing an action on that.
Yeah.
However, I would say maybe not what's seen here, but buffering against Camp Williams is a concern, period. I'm not saying what distance that is. And like Preston pointed out, it seems like we're going against that buffering and putting more of that space up close to that.
More developable spaces
And
adjacent.
again, I'm going from years of discussion of providing a buffer. I can't give you exactly what those numbers were because I'm apparently getting old and can't remember those numbers anymore. But that is where I'm saying is that buffer, plus in light of the recent state mandate, so that we just recommended to council to approve. So that's where I lean on.
As far as today's discussion, and potentially any, as far as when they purchased the property, it would have fallen under the older general plan, which does show a buffer zone, but it doesn't cover the whole property.
Correct. And so that to me would be where they're already kind of they're already going against where our current buffer is. And so that's why I would say that it is not compatible for that reason beyond this new requirement. Because they're putting those houses closer inside that buffer zone.
In that 2025 plan buffer zone.
Correct, in that 2025 buffer zone. So that's where I would say,
The 2025 buffer zone isn't the current buffer zone.
What's the current general plan?
It's the current general plan, but not when they purchased it, not when they started this process.
Well, the 2020.
agreed, but I mean, you can't go with that for it. I mean, there's lots of property that you buy and we continue to that's why we do general plans, that's why we continue to change.
Right, but it's based on when you start the process, not,
Yeah.
just like any other zoning.
Correct, but
Start
But
the process.
yes, but
Yeah, let Clint talk to this.
So when they began the process, the 2025 was the general plan.
Was
that
the
they were
general plan.
vested
yeah, if you
under.
look at
So
the
that's
date.
the older
We
one.
keep saying 2025, but it's the date it was published, which I believe was 2014. Right? I can't
It says
remember.
2014 in the corner.
Yeah, if we go back to the general plan that you referenced.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, but it was released in what year? 2014.
2014.
it was the 2014 general plan that showed this 2025 plan, or zone.
So,
yeah.
so it was, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm
now
using
that one has been
that merit.
replaced. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that one was in place when this
So although
process began.
staff is using this diagram, to justify this, I believe we're not meeting the intent because of the of the current general plan that was released in 2014, projected to 2025.
Which I think we have a slide here somewhere.
Yeah,
of that one.
if we could go find it, I could show you what I'm trying to say, but that one.
Yeah, there we go.
Adopted July 2014.
So that's where I would say, rather than what staff is recommending, because of the recent new evolution, this is why I would say they're not meeting the
They're
requirement
not meeting that.
in the area related to the
I would
military
still,
compatibility overlay.
I would still say that that information, that the studies that have been done, so there's a joint land use study that was done in 2014, and then this new study that was done in, just recently, the CAS, I mean, those haven't been formally adopted by the city, sure, but I think it's still information, and isn't that what we base our
Correct,
decisions
correct.
off of, is information, right? Studies have been completed to show, impacts, interest in buffering distances, and with those studies completed, I think that we can use those as
No,
basis for
I
our-
agree with you, because if this wasn't the military we were tying into and it was a city, right? The city of South Jordan, we'd actually be looking at their general plan to see if it is compatible. Like, I know it's on the opposite side.
Yeah.
But we would actually be thinking about it within reason. Doesn't
How do
make
roads
sense.
tie in?
Yeah. Is it compatible with the adjacent land use? Yep.
Well,
Which-
and my
well,
concern, I appreciate
adjacent properties.
what Brody said, that you can't have one entity dictate to another. But in this case, they're an extension of the United States government, military, and they serve a very specific purpose that we need to be mindful of them. I'm kind of thinking, I just don't have sufficient information without having Camp Williams' input to help me make that decision.
As well as they
That's how I
also
feel
are from
too.
a state element here as well to help with that state mission. And we got to remember, Camp Williams has been here longer than any of the cities around here, so.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but I think it was in 1919 that Camp Williams was formed.
Well, we can't ignore them, even though they don't have jurisdiction over
Correct.
our property, but they're certainly a stakeholder in this development.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
So I think we're done
Okay,
with number 3.
Number 3.
Now we go to
Move on to item 4. The proposal places a significant financial burden on the city. So as a planning commission, right, we don't really look at financial. That's not our,
I think this-
this one.
This one would be more of a city council
would put it-
determination.
I think we got to punt this one to the council as well.
I mean,
This,
it could be,
I could understand it, but I don't think we can comment.
that's
on it.
not our purview on this one.
The one comment I had about that, I haven't been privy to every conversation that's taken place with this development. I know that we've had, and I won't neglect or deny that Reed and his group have put in a tremendous amount of work. They had very detailed plans. There was just a lot of good that was in these plans. But one of the things so when I was doing the report and, I was looking at this criteria, and I went and talked to our community development director and to our public
Works.
Public Works Director, thank you. And I asked both of them, I said, hey, I'm trying to resolve this matter. Have we seen anything in concrete from this group that tells us that this will be feasible one way or the other? The financing that was suggested, the PID financing, a comment was made to me that would not be available for this application. So anyways, I didn't get any feedback from either of those individuals anyways, that stated that, yeah, we've seen enough information that we can solidly say that this will not have a fiscal impact on the city long-term. Clarify that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, this will be definitely unique utilities to this location because there's nothing else around it, is how you
Well,
could easily look at it.
it says special impact zone a la Suncrest,
Correct.
is what it says to me, but that's the city council issue, not us.
Exactly.
Yep, that's not us.
So based off those 4, are we ready to entertain a
I've-
motion, or are we?
I've
gonna-
actually
I
got
feel
a-
like-
I've got a thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, it's not a motion, but one thought I had is, what if we were to table the motion until we have an advisor from Camp Williams here? If the city council were to adopt what we passed tonight, if we were to table this for a month, the city adopts it in the meantime, then Camp Williams would have an advisor to us. That may help us with this discussion.
That's reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. What's the timing on, city council has to look through this, and then even to get a relationship with Camp Williams and an advisor in here, that's gonna take some time, right?
Yeah, so I think the city council would probably suggest this fairly soon. I think that they would like to see it before them fairly soon. You might want to speak with the applicant as well to see what their desire is, if they would, if they would want to have this tabled, or if they would just want a recommendation to move on to city council for a final decision.
Well, and you made it sound like there may be some mitigation things they have discussed that we don't fully know about, so I was thinking that may affect what we have to say. So,
No, I agree. If our motion is to, if we are going to go that route to continue this, I think we need to get an input. If that's not our motion, I think we can just keep moving forward. But yeah, I agree, because the applicant may have a different desire. They may want us just to make a decision. I believe that's part of the reason.
Well, then they have the due process side,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
may want that, right?
Yeah.
That's why.
Yep, exactly. So what was the other thought? That was one.
that was my main one, was.
Yeah, Brody, you had.
My thought, just, yeah, it feels like there's a missing piece, and it's representation of Camp Williams and what they're.
Similar thought then.
Yeah, exactly what they see for this property, or what their needs are, right? We're just kind of guessing with some of the information that we've gotten, but it'd be, I think, best for the applicant, us, and Camp Williams to have that representation.
So I see that all, but I actually still have a problem with the fact that the density we're talking about is higher than what we originally planned in master plan 4 in that area.
Yeah.
So I can see grounds on that alone, that one issue,
Yeah.
to be a reason why. I mean, remember, we don't always have to go higher density everywhere. And I
Right.
know we're used to it because we're always like, hey, why don't we put more places everywhere?
Nearly all the comments from the residences were
density
were
related.
density. Well, yeah, they all included density.
Correct, and
They're tired of high
we as planning
density.
commissioners can only rely on the general plan. And the fact that the general plan has been consistent in anywhere, I think we would do us disservice to start saying, you know what, why don't we make it a little more dense everywhere?
Yep.
So that's where, to me, I agree, normally I would say, let's table it and get the camp side. But there's a bigger topic here about density, and that to me, so there's I'll say there's 4 big issues. There's the cost, which we can't include, that's council. It's changing that whole area
Agreed.
at a higher density than we ever planned. That's a big one by itself. And then there's the camp impact. And so to me, I think I lean on, and that's why I think staff probably is recommending more of the denial, is because those are 4 big issues. As well as one of them is completely going against our general plan, which I think if we start to deviate
We do
from
not want to
that,
go there.
we might as well deviate it from everywhere.
We are
And
not
that's
gonna go
where-
there.
I mean, even when we got into the mixed use versus not mixed use conversation, when we were talking about lot sizes. I mean, we talk about Suncrest, we compared it to there. Suncrest does have some things for amenities up on that hill, very limited, but they still have some.
They have a fire station.
They have a fire station, have a variety of things where I think we would be doing a disservice if we just did it right now.
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
so I lean on the denial for that reason, but.
We definitely need to have fire stations and some other things up there.
And that's where this is a big impact regionally.
Yeah.
I don't think we can really begrudge it by schools because that's schools' responsibility, but definitely safety, which is one of our other charters, is to make sure it stays safe. And I just think
For
under
me,
the
that
current
would be the
proposal,
biggest
there's
one
too
is
many
safety.
concerns.
For me, that would be safety. Safety would be the biggest one for me.
You know, if you look, again, going to Suncrest, they do have a second total egress through Utah County, right? And that's where they got their reasonable. We don't have that in this plan. So that's where I would say, to me, that's where I lean more on the denial. Normally, you guys know me, I'm usually more of a table perspective, because so we can get the real information. But that density is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I just want to add also, I agree with everything Adam just said, but then on the reasoning that you were given for the tabling of wanting more information from Camp Williams, I mean, frankly, with how much study has gone into this on the developer's end, while we can still consider it informationally, also the information that was provided for Camp Williams, we've got an 80-page report on Camp Williams' opinion of the area. And then Camp Williams was noticed if they chose not to be here. And then he mentioned when he contacted them, they were instructed to say no comment. I don't know how much more information we can expect from them, even if we were to give them that opportunity.
Harriman couldn't have instructed them to say no comment.
No, I'm saying that's what the developer stated they gave him.
But I think a bigger question is, has staff had a conversation on this property with camp specifically?
My assumption is that they have. I'm getting texts here from some of our administration. It sounds like at this point the camp does not want to get involved. They don't want to come present before the Planning Commission. There's a separate process that will entail for the developer to take their project to what's called the Military Affairs group, and then they will make a decision there, but they didn't want to get in the middle of a land use decision. I think all the things that you've talked about in regards to, not coming to the meeting, you're not responding to the developer, those are, to me, clear indications of the right direction that the camp would prefer to move. But I think there is a separate process for the camp to have.
Which is why they might not be here, right? They might have other
Yeah,
reasons.
well, and with or without that information or their input, points have been made.
Yep.
That, yeah.
So I lean on
Okay.
the motion if anybody's.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll go ahead
we can deny it, and then they can come back with another version.
Council can always push it back on.
Yeah,
their denials, guys.
council can do what they want. We're going to make a recommendation to the council, and it'll be up to them.
So I recommend to city council denial of item 5.2 due to the staff's recommendations, but really highlighting that it's going against our general plan.
We have a motion by Adam
I'll second
and a
that.
second by Heather. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Brody?
No.
Okay, that motion does carry forward as a recommendation for denial for item 5.2. With that, we do not need to do anything by way of presentation for item 5.3. I think we've heard all of the information. We do need to have a separate public hearing. So at this time, I'll just go ahead and move right into item 5.3's public hearing at this time, if there's any comments that would like to be made in regard to Malibu
As a
property.
procedural, do we need to see if Reed would like to say anything on 5.3? Or did he say that at the end of
Yeah,
the
he said-
presentation
yeah.
for 5.3?
I would say
Yeah.
if we get any public comment
If
for
we-
5.3, then we'll give him.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll have another
Perfect, that
opportunity
works.
for him. He was able to give a comment or response on the other items. So if there's any other comments tonight on this. So item 5.3, go ahead. Again, just for the record and formalities, please state your name.
My name is Paul Butler. I don't know how notes are kept here, but since there are two different public hearings for the two different issues, I just want to repeat that my comments that I made previously are applicable to this one also.
Perfect. We'll take note. Thank you. And that would be the case for the comments that we've received so far, correct? Again, formality, but please state your name.
Connor Buxton, just want to reiterate my previous statements. Also want to add, never mind, not for this council.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further, actually, public entity here, we'll go ahead and I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Heather and a second by Daryl. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Seeing there was no new comments, we'll just go ahead and forego any additional information needed. I think we've had all the information. Is there any other discussion points for this item from Planning Commission?
I'm ready to make a motion.
We'll go ahead and entertain a motion then.
I recommend denial of item 5.3, again highlighting that it's going contrary to our general master plan.
Okay.
A second?
I have a motion by Adam and a second by Heather. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
Okay, that item moves forward as a recommendation for denial to the city council. As mentioned many times, this will now go to the city council for their final approval with that. So we'll move on to item 6, which is chair and commission comments. Maybe one comment that I'll just make regarding the information that was provided today, as mentioned by the applicant on these last two items. He was not able to receive the public comments per se prior, the same comments that we had received, right, as a planning commission. So it might be appropriate to provide those same comments in a different email, perhaps, but to the applicant as well, so that they're aware.
Or at
of-
least have them printed off.
Or
so they
print
can
them
read
off so
at
we
the
can hand it
beginning
to
of
them.
the meeting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll go ahead and forward those to the applicant today.
Okay.
Or tomorrow.
Yeah, and it would probably be appropriate, though, to give him that opportunity even prior so that there would be some opportunity for him to comment and
Yeah,
respond to those as
yeah,
well.
for sure. That's
So,
something we
so
probably
yeah.
overlooked and should have
But
done.
yeah, for future reference, yeah, I would make that recommendation.
If I can just compliment the applicant, we've rarely had a presentation as thorough as yours.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, well, future meetings coming up, so next week will be city council. I don't know if this item will be on the agenda, but probably too soon for that. But for those of you interested, keep an eye out because the agendas are posted ahead of time, within a week usually. So you can see when those items come up for city council meetings. And then 2 weeks from today will be a planning commission meeting on May 3rd. And then the following week after that, on May 10th, another city council meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, I'm gonna give it to Heather. Heather got that one.
Second then.
Second, Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. It was a tie. Tie goes to Heather.
Thanks for all your thoughts tonight.
Yes, thank you for your input.
Sharing a mind with you at the same time.
No, we appreciate your background.
It's just tough. I know the guys put blood, sweat, and tears into it.
They wanted it.
You know, if it wasn't next to
He did a really good job of presenting,
Yeah.
and I really like their design.
Oh, I love their design.
I like it, but I agree, the density's not where it needs to be. It's too much.